he'd like to trade an acting career for a seat in the U.S. Senate. Today, a conversation with Democrat Hill Harper. And the Supreme Court makes its long-awaited ruling on presidential immunity. Should the president be above the law? Today is Sunday, July 7th, 2024, and this is Flashpoint.
Hi, welcome to Flashpoint. I hope you enjoyed your 4th of July or your Canada Day. I'm really glad you're with us this morning. It was almost a week ago the Supreme Court ruled, with bitter division we should note, that a president acting in an official capacity as president is immune from prosecution. If he acts in a personal capacity, something that is not considered an official duty, then he does not have immunity. Well, how do we begin to decide what is official and what is personal? And even for things that are official, does it make sense that the president is not held to the letter of the law? We're going to talk about that just ahead this morning. But up first, I've been hoping to host a joint appearance in the Democratic race to succeed Debbie Stabenow in the U.S. Senate between Congresswoman Alyssa Slotkin and the actor Hill Harper. The Slotkin campaign has turned down our invitation, but Hill Harper is here to talk this morning about his candidacy. Is it a reach for someone with no elected office experience to start at the deep end of the pool? What kind of experience can he bring to bear on the weighty issues facing the United States? And where does he stand on the question that is vexing Democrats everywhere this past week? Should President Biden be the Democratic nominee for president? Hill Harper is up first this morning on Flashpoint. All right, Hill Harper has made quite a name for himself as Dr. Sheldon Hawks on CSI NY, but now he'd like to make a name for himself as Michigan Senator Hill Harper. And Hill is my first guest today. Hill, good to have you here. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
I think the obvious question that people would ask you is, you know, you've never had elected office experience before. Jumping into the Senate, which is described often as the greatest deliberative political body in the world,
yes,
seems like to some people a bridge too far for somebody with no political experience. Why the Senate?
Not at all. I'll tell you, the senator that I would most likely like to replicate, and the senator that I think is actually the best senator out of the 100, is Elizabeth Warren. You know, former professor at my law school, Harvard Law School.
True.
And she had no electoral experience before, no legislative experience, and she's actually our best senator. And I think in this moment, we don't need more people who have come up through the ranks politically. We actually need people like myself that would bring experience around small business ownership, experience around being a union member. So just think about this, Devin. If I'm elected to the U.S. Senate, I'll be only one of 2 parents of an elementary age child. I would be the only active union member in the United States Senate, and I'd be only one of a handful of small business owners. We don't need more of the same in the Senate. We actually need people with different lived experience that actually bring a different light to solve the problems we have right now. Without question, if you look at all the candidates in both the Democratic side and the Republican side, I'm the candidate that actually fits that bill for this moment in a way that I think is far beyond the other candidates.
In fact, maybe given your background, maybe a better question than how did you get into, why are you getting into politics? How'd you move into acting in the first place? But let me ask you the kind of the question of the week right now, and as you and I are recording this conversation, Joe Biden is making it clear he's going to stick around as the standard bearer for the party. Do you believe Joe Biden should be the Democratic nominee for president?
You know, I do. I mean, this is where we are. He has gotten the nomination. So until Joe Biden decides that he does not want to be the nominee, then he's the nominee. I mean, that's the simple fact.
I don't think there's any way around that. But should he be, I guess? Would it be in the best interest of the party for him, given the debate performance?
You know, neither Biden or Trump are on my ballot. I'm focused on August 6th. I'm focused on this primary. I am not thinking or trying to figure out what the Democratic Party or the DNC or big donors for the Democratic Party think or feel. I know that there's a lot of chatter about that. That's not my focus. My focus is on talking to Michigan voters, figuring out how I can create solutions for them as their next U.S. Senator. And that's why I think we're winning voters 3-1 everywhere we go, because they don't want someone who's playing political theater theater games. They actually want someone who's common sense, solution oriented, that shows up and says, I don't care what's happening over there. What do you need? And that's exactly the kind of campaign we've run, and that's what we're going to continue to run it.
This being a Michigan voters, though, the other criticism that you've heard a lot is that while you are running in Michigan, you haven't spent a ton of time here. You do own a house here. You've started a business here, a successful coffee business. But you look at your life over the last couple of years, it's been far more centered in California, Seattle, Vancouver.
That's not true. Well, that's absolutely not true. I moved here, so part of what a lot of people don't know is that I actually have lived in Michigan longer than my opponent, which is a very interesting thing. So
and again, I wish she was here. We've invited. I wish she was here too. That's what I wanted to happen.
And we can talk.
Anyway,
we can talk about why she's pulled out of so many debates and have that conversation as well. I don't know the reason why, but we can have conjecture.
But back to Michigan.
So back to the Michigan. So point is that I adopted my son. I decided my roommates when I was at Harvard Law School were both from Michigan. One was at Harvard Medical School, Charles Boyd, who lives here, Dr. Boyd, and then Brian Mathis, who's from Grand Rapids, went to the University of Michigan. He was my roommate for 4 years. Actually, was engaged to Carla Diggs from the Diggs family, Judge Diggs, Congressman Diggs. And so I met so many Michiganders. At the end of the day, I decided I wanted to raise my kids here. So I said, when I have children, I'm going to raise them here. My son was born December 19, 2015. Ended up renting a place right at the beginning of 2016. He was just born. Ended up renting a place. Found my house, bought it, took some time to renovate it because it was an big old house. And so I've had my business here for 7 years. I've lived here for 8 years. My opponent actually came here just to run for Congress after the 45th president won. And so the idea that somehow she's more Michigan than me, or I'm not Michigan, or this is just not true.
You spent a lot of time out of the state. I mean, there's
I work a job, and so the job is out of the state. So you have to commute there to actually work. And so what happens is, and this is what's interesting about political speak and media, is that the truth is that Michigan is my home. It's been my home for 8 years. And the beautiful thing is that the things I've been doing here and sowing seeds in the community, this Senate seat is just an outgrowth of that in a great way.
Let me get to a number of the issues that will be facing whoever goes to the Senate.
That's right.
Obviously, Michigan is uniquely positioned in viewing and understanding, or trying to understand, the Israel-Hamas war. What do you think American policy should be toward that?
Well, I was very clear about this. I was the first Senate candidate to call for ceasefire, and I've been emphatic about that call. And unfortunately, my opponent has made some very, very, in my opinion, wrong moves and wrong decisions, not the least of which was just last week of voting to not fund the State Department to confirm Gaza's health ministry's records around injuries and death. We don't need cover-ups. We need to know exactly what has happened. She also voted to sanction the ICC.
I want to stay with your plans.
So for me, specifically, my plans are the opposite of those, meaning we have to know and we have to understand the death toll. I condemn terrorism. You talk about Hamas. Hamas needs to be ended without question. But I also condemn the innocent killing of tens of thousands, now we're in the 40s of thousands, of innocent civilians. You know, when I try to get people to think about this, the Gaza is the exact same size as Detroit, 148 square miles. And when we walk out of this building, we're in Detroit, downtown Detroit. If you look to your right, everything's flattened. Look to your left, everything's flattened. Just imagine that. And then count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 people, that person's dead. Then count again, that person's dead.
Right.
It is horrific what's happened. And we cannot have a foreign policy that is unbalanced, that's driven by special interest. You have over 74% of Michigan Democrats calling for ceasefire, but less than 10% of Democrats have called for it.
Has President Biden let you down on this topic?
Yes, he has. You know, we have to do better. And we have to condemn terrorism and stop terrorism, but we have to respect the Arab and Muslim community, and we have to respect humanity. I am always pro-peace. Okay, I always say this: there's no good war and there's no bad peace.
Another issue Michigan uniquely faces, I think, is our trade relationship with China. What do you think America's relationship with China should be, and how do we draw it up?
We have not invested in ourselves and in infrastructure. We are getting hurt by China, and it's a shame. They are out.
And yet we need them, right?
Well,
as trade partners?
We need them as trade partners to a certain extent. We have to take care of home first. We have to take care of home first. I go out there, I'm a 32-year union member, and I was out there on the strike lines. That's why I have so much UAW support. And the simple fact is that if we don't take care of home first, then there's going to be what we see now, where I hear the frustrations of the guys talking about, we are just assembling parts, we're actually not manufacturing. And there's a frustration there. There's a frustration that we have to invest in our own infrastructure at home, our own jobs at home, and we have to support unions. That's another reason why I want to pass the PRO Act to undergird our unions. We got to get that done.
I've only got about 40 seconds left, which is not fair for this question.
Okay.
But should you make it to the next to the general election, no doubt immigration is going to be a massive fight between Democrats and Republicans.
Sure.
What is common sense immigration policy?
Common sense immigration is, first, you have to secure the border. We have to stop fentanyl coming through. We have to stop folks that want to do us harm. We have to secure the border. We can do that through technology. We can do that through hiring more Border Patrol. We can actually secure it without question. It's like you have to stop the bleeding. That has to happen. We also have to invest in a legal immigration process that is fair, that actually allows immigration to happen in a legal way. And it's going to take a massive amount of investment in terms of judges, in terms of folks who are working, attorneys, and I know we got to wrap it up. But other folks, you're saying we got to stop.
I always run out of time before I run out of questions.
I understood.
But and again, I wish that we were having a debate between you and Alyssa Slotkin, but I'm grateful that you were here. Thanks very much for coming in.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate it. We come back, we'll talk about the Supreme Court. This is Flashpoint on Local 4. All right, welcome back. Last week, on the last possible day to release a decision for this term, the Supreme Court ruled that a president does indeed enjoy immunity from prosecution for actions that are deemed official actions related to the presidency. The justices in the majority see it as the only way a president can function in the best interest of the country. The minority suggested that we've now made the president a king. Very happy, again, to have with me two people who have served as U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of Michigan, Barbara McQuaid and Matthew Schneider. So glad you're both here. Before we get to the decision itself, no matter which side of this you're on, this feels to me to be a case of judicial malpractice, to wait so long to issue this decision with criminal cases, a sentencing, and an election year all happening concurrently. I'm really glad the Supreme Court isn't an emergency room. Barbara, am I wrong?
I certainly feel some empathy for your position. You know, Jack Smith asked the Supreme Court to decide this case in January to leapfrog the Court of Appeals on the theory that it was going to end up there anyway. Let's get going. And instead, it took 6 months to get this decision. But I suppose in light of the decision, which requires further judicial proceedings, a remand to the district court, it was never going to be decided before the election anyway. And so perhaps they knew all along that there really was no urgency here.
Matthew, your thoughts on that? And again, I would say that I would feel this way no matter how you feel about, you know, which side of this you were on. Both sides needed the decision, it seems to me, kind of quickly.
I agree with that, and I never thought that it would take place prior to the election because of all those procedural hurdles, all those steps in the process. It takes a long time, both for the government and the defendant to be heard. And not only that, Devin, if you think it's been long so far, just wait. We're just at the start of what's going to happen. This is going to drag out for another several years, probably.
Yeah. Well, let me let you both weigh in on just your initial reaction to the decision as it came down. As I mentioned, really bitter between the two sides on the court. How do you both feel? Matthew, you take a whack at it first.
I think a lot of people viewed this as a victory for Donald Trump, and this gave him a level of immunity that he had been looking for.
Yeah.
And it is one way to look at it, but I also look at it in a way it's a victory for Joe Biden, because there's been a lot of talk about if Donald Trump is elected, he would go after Joe Biden, he would try to prosecute him. And now this Supreme Court opinion gives him protection against that, and it protects the president from that type of official act prosecution. So it actually can be beneficial whether you're a Republican or a Democrat.
Interesting. Beneficial to those two. Is it better for the nation? Barbara, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, you know, this case really comes down to one's view of presidential authority. The majority focuses on the need for a president to be able to act boldly and fearlessly. And the dissenters say that's exactly what we're afraid of. What we would prefer is avoiding a president who might have the power of a king to be able to engage in criminal behavior without any accountability. I guess I'd say a couple of things. I don't think it's crazy to divide the world into official acts versus unofficial acts and say a president is immune from prosecution for his official acts and then is held to the same rule of law for everybody else for their unofficial acts. But where I see the divergence is the concurring opinion by Amy Coney Barrett, which I think I agree with. She says that the court really goes a little too far because what they say is that even evidence that is derived from official conduct cannot be used, and prosecutors can't use or delve into the president's motive in even proving crimes for unofficial acts. And I worry that as a practical matter, it will be difficult for this case to go forward with even the unofficial acts. And there are plenty left. I mean, I think there's some left of this case that can go forward. The things with soliciting false slates of electors, the pressure on state officials in Michigan and elsewhere, the public statements trying to take advantage of the chaos on January 6th to continue to delay the election. All of that really probably occurs with Donald Trump in his capacity as a candidate and not as the president. But I think that Justice Barrett has a point about preventing the prosecution from using even the motive evidence and even the official acts as evidence. It may end up precluding them from really holding a president accountable for even unofficial acts, which really might be a bridge too far.
Interesting. The trying to figure these, I suppose you're right. As a candidate, although if I was Donald Trump's attorneys, I would be trying to argue that everything he did, of course, was acting as president and trying to argue that it was in the best interests of the nation. I know that, Barbara, I think you've said that you think about 60% of the cases against him can proceed. Matthew, where does this leave the prosecution now on all these matters?
I agree with that. I think there's some that exists, probably around the range of 60%, where those things still survive in this case. And what we have to see now is what happens in the lower courts and how they're going to ferret this out. One of the interesting parts is the allegation about Trump interfering with Mike Pence. Now, remember that the president is saying that's an official act because I was the president and I could oversee the vice president. But the president really has nothing to do with the certification of the votes and the supervision of the Senate chamber like the vice president does. And so there's a strong argument as well that that's not really an official act in what he was engaged in. So it will be very interesting to see how this takes place, especially with these state cases still ongoing. And these are political activities that the president was involved in. He's saying that he was in charge of overseeing the federal election. State elections are really run by states, and so there's going to be some vigorous debate back and forth in the courts between the parties about what is an official act and what is not.
Barbara, in my lifetime, we've never seen confidence in the court itself lower than it is right now. And to that point, we had two justices that many people felt should have recused themselves from this and maybe other decisions as well. Does that hold water?
Well, I think, there's a big picture argument that there's some concern about Justice Thomas's role in light of the fact that there is evidence that his wife, Ginny Thomas, was trying to persuade Mark Meadows when he was the chief of staff to do everything in his power to stop the certification of the election. And so, the standard is if a person's impartiality could reasonably be questioned by the members of the public, they ought to recuse. I think reasonable people might question the impartiality of Clarence Thomas. When it comes to Justice Alito, I'm not sure that his recusal is quite as stark as that of Justice Thomas. He has been reported to have accepted some free trips from donors and other things like that. I don't know that that directly pertains to this case, but the bigger picture is the ethics of the court, and it isn't just Thomas and Alito who have had accusations about them. It's also Chief Justice Roberts, it's Justice Sonia Sotomayor, it's Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson. I think a strict ethics code that makes it clear, that has some teeth, that has an inspector general. They passed their own ethics code this year in response to some of these reports and allegations. But when Matthew and I were in government, we had one simple rule: like, we couldn't take any free stuff. Like, period. There was a token, I think $20, for lunches and dinners at widely attended gatherings.
Yeah.
But other than that, like, not even a cup of coffee. Seems like a pretty good rule to me. And if you want to serve the public, serve the public. Don't accept exorbitant gifts or any gifts at all.
Seems reasonable. Matthew, the old saying is, it takes years to build a reputation and a couple of seconds to destroy it. How do we get that back for the Supreme Court?
It's certainly going to take time, and every time there's a president, that's an issue that comes up: is who is he or she going to appoint? And the American people have a lack of confidence, not only in the Supreme Court, but in our governmental institutions. And we're seeing that right now in criminal cases where there's been so much attack against the FBI, for example. Now, in even smaller cases, federal prosecutors are having really big difficulties in proving a bank robbery case, for example. They're saying that the jurors are now suspicious of FBI agents in a simple bank robbery case. Now, look, most of Americans aren't going to be involved in the Mar-a-Lago documents case or things like that, but they might be victims of crime, and they might be interacting in a bank robbery or something like that. So we need to make sure that we have confidence in federal law enforcement by the people, so that those cases can still be brought to juries, the defense been given a fair trial, and those can be brought to verdict.
That's so right. I've got just a little bit of time left. I want to let you both, though, weigh in on maybe another decision that you feel is not getting as much attention. Obviously, we're all focused on immunity. We had a lot of big decisions that came down from this court. Barbara, you first.
The one that irked me most is a case called Snider, not Schneider, but Snider, overturning the conviction of the mayor of Portage, Indiana, for accepting $13,000 in payoffs for shepherding through $1 million contract with a trucking company. The court interpreted that to say the bribe has to be paid before the corrupt act. If money changes hands after the corrupt act, not a violation of federal law. To me, that is really overstepping and will change the ways we went about our work in prosecuting corrupt state and local officials.
That one was wild. Matthew, how about you?
There have been a lot of cases, and will be a lot of cases, involving firearms, regarding bump stocks, and firearms with people who have misdemeanor convictions. I think it's important to prosecute people who are unlawfully possessing firearms, and we can strike a balance between the Second Amendment, protecting our right to own and carry firearms, but yet also going after people who abuse those rights and use them improperly. And those cases are not going away. That will still continue to be happening for years and years to come.
Barbara and Matthew, I love it when I can get the two of you together. I always feel like I gain a few pounds in my brain when I talk to you both. So thanks so much for the time. Really appreciate it. We'll look forward to having you back again soon.
Thank you, Devin.
Thank you.
You got it. We'll take a quick break. Back with more on Flashpoint right after this. And poof, just like that, we're out of time. Thanks so much for being here. Meet the Press coming up next. Have a great week, and we'll see you next time right back here for Flashpoint.